Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from whatever you're joining us. My name is Dalia and I work as a Senior Developer Marketing Manager here at Kong. I'm so happy to have you here for our Developer Day for October. So today we're going to cover topics for developer experience. We're going to talk about the developer portal, observability, and identity with Kong Konnect. We have Jordi and Panagis here with us. They will be the presenters. Just making sure that everyone knows this is being recorded. Afterwards, we will upload it to YouTube and we will send you a follow-up email with some resources in the recording so you can rewatch it if you want to. And just make sure that you post all of your questions in the Q&A function on the bottom rather than in the chat so we can keep track of everything and answer them one after another. And yeah, Jordi, please take it away from here.
Cool. Thank you, Dalia, and welcome everyone to the Developer Day. Today, we will be talking about how to automate or create a good developer experience, a great developer experience when dealing with Kong Konnect and the developer portal, observability, dashboarding, and identity management. We will do so following our journey so far. This is the third webinar. We had two webinars before that we will show. We will give a little bit more details in the coming slides. But we are working with an imaginary airline, which we call Kong Air, which had already a journey in terms of setting up a platform team and API teams. And in today's webinar, we will focus on how the platform team can offer services, can offer actions in GitHub as a service to the API teams. And we will be specifically talking about how can we allow the API teams to self-service the deployment of data planes and self-service the publishing of APIs and dashboardings into Konnect in a, let's say, following best practices and the governance rules of the Kong airline. And in the end, we will leave 15-20 minutes for questions, whatever you may have during the presentation. So hold your questions, write it down in the Q&A section of the webinar, and then we will come back to them at the end of the presentation. Right, so as I was mentioning, this is the third episode of the three episodes that we had already. In the first one, we had Konnect Automations 101, and that led my colleague Panos here, that is here with me today. And then we had the second one, Konnect Automations. In the first one, we focus on how to onboard API teams and how to offer the first platform as a service element in Kong Air. In the second one, we focus on how to configure the gateway in a very easy way for the API team. So again, the platform team provides a service, the API teams consume that service, creating a great developer experience. So let me talk a little bit to recap what is Kong Air and what is the journey in terms of API management for Kong Air. So Kong Air is an imaginary airline, as we mentioned, and they want to productize their capabilities via APIs, right? So, we are now living in a world in which customers expect a seamless experience across many different channels and presentation layers, be it web, mobile, chat, AI agents, social media, you name it. And in order to provide the necessary capabilities and provide a seamless consumer journey, it is important to productize the capabilities of an airline via APIs in a presentation agnostic way so that they can be embedded in all those experiences. And here by capabilities, we mean things like flight operations, ground operations, commercial operations, and so on and so forth, which are the typical ones in any airline. But the company is committed to create as well a self-service platform. And in order to do so, one of the main initiatives is to create an API platform engineering team. And the purpose of the platform engineering team is to provide a set of services that the API teams can consume without any meeting, without any interaction, in a completely self-service way to accelerate the delivery of new features and capabilities in the platform. And so our platform engineering team has been building those capabilities, which we saw in the first webinar and in the second webinar as well, what were some of those capabilities. And therefore, the API teams can consume those capabilities in a self-service fashion, very easy, and they can go on building the APIs that they need to build while making sure that those are deployed and documented following the best practice and the governance rules of the Kong Air airline. So to be more specific, what we saw already in the previous webinars is, first of all, how to allow for self-service onboarding into the platform. So assuming we are an API team and we are not yet onboarded into the Kong Konnect platform, so we don't have our own teams and service accounts and the credentials that we need to operate with Kong Konnect. So we saw how the platform team created a service so that any API team can request an onboarding into the platform in a fully automated and self-service manner. Then we saw as well how the platform team exposed a GitHub action as a service so that API teams can request resources to be created for them. And we saw how API teams can request control planes, and we will see today how API teams can go on and request more resources. We will see that through the during this webinar. And we saw in the second episode how API teams can as well deploy their configuration in the API gateway, starting with an OpenAPI specification. Again, the platform team exposes a very complete and comprehensive GitHub action that takes care of all the governance and all the transformations necessary to deploy the configuration of an API into the Konnect control plane. So to continue this journey and complete the developer experience that we want to expose to our API teams, today we will see how we can offer the API teams the possibility to deploy a data plane by themselves without having to interact with the platform team. And we will see how the platform team creates and exposes a GitHub action to do exactly that. We will see as well that the platform team has created a developer portal for the Kong Air organization so that any API team can now deploy their OpenAPI specifications and their documentation for those APIs automatically via pipelines, again, purely self-service into Kong Konnect first and then publish those APIs into the developer portal. So that API teams, as long as they have an OpenAPI specification and eventually some documentation in Markdown format, they can go ahead and expose their APIs into the developer portal. We will see as well how this creates a self-service consumption experience for the API consumers. So I will be able to go to the API portal and choose the API that I want to consume and immediately obtain credentials for it. And last, we will see as well how API teams can even request their own dashboards to monitor their own APIs, right? So that they have their own dashboard that provides visibility on the performance and several metrics on the APIs that belong to them. So that every API team or every line of business can have their own dashboard and monitor properly the APIs that they are exposing in the Konnect platform. In terms of the technology stack, we will continue to use the same technology stack that we already use in the two previous webinars. That means that we will be creating our pipelines, our actions and workflows using GitHub. We will be leveraging the Terraform providers that Kong provides for Konnect so that we can manage the whole Konnect state via Terraform. And we will use S3 buckets as the state management for Terraform as well. And we will use HashiCorp Vault to store the credentials of the system accounts that we will be using through the execution of the actions. We saw already in the first webinar the setup of HashiCorp, how teams were onboarded, and that was the time in which those credentials are stored into HashiCorp Vault. So I will refer to the first webinar, which is available in YouTube, the first and the second webinars. Now, with this technology stack, I think we can go ahead and go to the get hands-on with the data plane deployment with the first demo. And to start with, I will then hand over to my colleague Panos. In this webinar, by the way, Panos is playing the role of platform engineering. So he's the one working on Konnect API platform engineering, preparing all the heavy lifting of the GitHub actions. And I will be playing the role of an API team. So hopefully I will have, by the end of this webinar, a very simple developer experience that allows me to deploy APIs and request resources in a very easy manner. Right, so back to you then, Panos.
Thank you very much, Jordi. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from me as well. Give me a second to share my screen. So, as Jordi mentioned, I will be the platform engineer for the Konnect Platform API Management platform. What I want to show you first is to give you a brief overview of what does the state looks so far. As Jordi mentioned in the previous two webinars, we went through a series of different actions. So at this point, I am, as you can see, logged in my Konnect organization. Under my organization, you can see that we have our flight operations team that has already been self-served and onboarded in the platform. Under the flight operations team, you will notice that automatically a system account is created for that team. That system account is a system account that the team will be using in order to interact with the Konnect platform from now on. And also the correct and the required roles and permissions have been automatically assigned to the system account depending on the entitlements the team requested during the initial onboarding phase. So as you can see here, the system account, for example, is a creator, publisher, and a viewer of APIs. That means that that system account is able to create and manage their own APIs in Konnect. And it's also a viewer and creator of control planes. So that system account is also able to create and manage their own control planes in Konnect. So because the flight operations team during the second webinar has already provisioned the control planes, as you can see, this specific system account is now also administrator of the 3 control planes the flight operations team originally requested. So if we go and see the control planes, we can see that in our API gateway, we have 3 gateways or 3 control planes already provisioned. These are the control planes that the team themselves requested and provisioned via automation in the previous webinars, one for each and every one of their environments. And especially in the development environment, in the control plane of their development environment, they have also configured their initial services and their initial routes. One important thing to recap is that during the team onboarding phase, which is where the respective team's system account was also created, that system account was also assigned with a token, right? That token is the token that the respective team will be using to authenticate with the Konnect APIs via automation, right? And this token is also safely stored in the respective team's private key vault under the system accounts section. So that team has access to their own key vault, right? And therefore they have access to their own system account tokens to use during their automation process. Then that being said, let me also give you a brief recap of what we have available in the platform engineering team's GitHub repository. This repository that you see is the repository that the platform engineering team owns, and it contains all the logic in order for them to be able to onboard the teams automatically, in order to provision, maintain, and manage the infrastructure, in order to provision the components that are needed, whether that is on Konnect, whether that is in their deployment clusters, whether that is in the key vaults, right? All the logic is actually contained in this repository. After the end of these sessions, we will be sharing also the repositories and the code examples with you, so that you can spend your own time getting acquainted with the processes and the examples that we're using throughout those 3 webinars. But the most important part in this repository are the GitHub shared actions, right? Those GitHub shared actions is how the platform team is providing the capabilities of the platform to the applications team themselves, right? So as you can see here, and for the ones that attended the previous 2 sessions, we have a shared action that allows teams to provision resources in Konnect. We have a shared action that allows teams to configure their API configurations on the control planes that they own. And for the purpose of this demo, right, we have also one more new action that is called deploy data plane, and it's the action that allows the teams to deploy their own data planes and connect them to their own control planes, right? So let me briefly show you what happens in this action. First of all, this action requires some inputs, right? Some inputs like the Kong image repository. The teams, since they are deploying their own control planes and they are responsible for their own control planes, they can also define the version or the repository where they can get the Kong image to deploy. And then we have the team name over here. After that, we have the control plane clustering certificates, the control plane clustering certificates key, the control plane endpoints and the telemetry endpoints, as well as the control plane name. Those are the control plane connectivity information, right, that the deployed data plane will use in order to connect to the appropriate control plane and establish a secure connection with that control plane. So all this information, right, is available to the team's private key vault mount, right? So the team has access to this information, and this information is provisioned during the control plane resource request phase that the team used, right? So when the team requested the control planes, automatically the control planes were provisioned, and all the control plane information and connectivity information was stored for them into their own vault, right? So as I mentioned before, here we have the control plane clustering information. Then we have the environment that the team wants to deploy the control plane, their AWS credentials, right? For this example, we will be deploying the control plane on an EKS cluster, right? So the team needs to have access to the EKS cluster in order to deploy the control plane. So they need to provide the credentials as well. Then the AWS region, and then the cluster name, right? The cluster on which they need to deploy the control plane. So these are the inputs, right, that the application team wanting to deploy the control plane has to provide to this action. And then let's see what happens in this action, right? First of all, we're checking out the repository. We're setting up some initial tooling like the AWS CLI, kube controller. We are configuring the AWS credentials based on the credentials provided by the application team. We're setting up some initial environment variables, right? We're setting up the kube context in order to be able to connect and deploy to our cluster. And then we are following the common basic steps that we usually follow in order to deploy a Kong control plane, right? So we will be using the official Kong Helm charts in order to deploy the control plane. This is the easiest and more reliable and recommended solution. So we are adding the Kong Helm charts. We are creating a namespace on which we will be deploying our data plane. Then we are creating the Kong clustering certificates, right? And these certificates are created from the control plane connectivity information inputs, right? And then at the end, we are deploying, as you can see, the data plane using the provided inputs as information, and also using this initial values.yaml file, right, which is the bare minimum that we need to configure in order to deploy a Kong data plane on Kubernetes, right? As you can see in this these values file, sorry, we are providing the image of the Kong. We're setting the clustering certificate volume. Then, because we're deploying on EKS, we also define some network load balancer annotation, so we can actually also expose our data plane to the public. And last but not least, we are defining our required common environment variables, which we can either extend, right, or override, like I have done here during the deployment process. So, recapping, this is the shared action that the platform team is providing as an asset, as a capability for the platform teams to use in order to deploy their own data planes, and at the same time having a governance, right, over how the data plane should be deployed in this specific occasion in the EKS clusters. So this was the data plane part on the platform engineering side. So now let's go back to Jordi, and he will show us the application team side. How can they actually deploy their control plane? So Jordi, back to you.
Thank you. Now let me share again my screen. Right. So now my experience as an API team is very, very simple. The only thing I have to do is to create a workflow like this one, which simply does a checkout and then obtains the secrets that belong to my system account, so that we make sure that I'm only making changes to Konnect that I'm allowed to make to the resources that I own and nothing else. And as you can see, the only thing that I have to inform is the name of my API team, which will be used to retrieve the certificates that Panos was talking about for the connectivity between the data plane and the control plane. And I can self-service myself and even select which version of the gateway do I want to deploy in the data plane, right? With my AWS credentials, which are as secrets in GitHub, and the secrets and the certificates that we just obtained, right? So that's everything I need to inform, which is almost nothing really. It's simply the connecting name in a vars in a vars file, and then I can, as I mentioned, I can select what is the version of the data plane that I want to deploy. I'm not aware that behind the scene, I'm not aware of what is going on behind the scenes. As you can see here, this is the key, probably the key line in this file. I'm consuming the action that the platform engineering team created for me. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know that it's Helms and AWS. Well, I know because the credentials it's AWS, but I'm not aware of the complexity that is going on behind the scenes for the deployment of the data plane, right? So to me, it's a service that I can invoke at any point in time. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. So let me then switch to GitHub. And I'm here in my repository in the actions section of GitHub. And I'm going to deploy a data plane. So I go to this section here, and then I simply run the workflow. And I want to deploy that in the development environment. So, okay, let's run this workflow. A new action starts. And I can see what is being executed in the action that the platform team prepared for me, but I actually don't have to worry about it. It's purely informative. I mean, of course, if there is some error or something like this, then I can see it here. But right now, all the Helm chart execution is going on behind the scenes. And in a few seconds, that's it. The data plane has been deployed. So this has finished. And if we go now into the Konnect user interface, I go to the control plane that belongs to the development environment. And if I go to the details of data planes, I can see that now there is a 311 data plane that has been deployed and is connected and it's in sync. So the configuration that was stored, as Panos showed before, in the control plane has now reached the data plane. So I have now a data plane configured and ready to process API traffic to my upstream services, my Kong Air upstream services. And this is how a data plane has been deployed. This is my experience as an API team to deploy a data plane, right? And this is exactly what we aim for when we are talking about setting up an API platform team that creates service or that creates a self-service environment for API teams in a federated way of working. Because of course let's assume, or we assume here that I am allowed as an API team to deploy my own data planes. But maybe Kong Air is a very big organization. Maybe we don't want some other API teams to be able to deploy their own data planes, and the platform team will take care of that, right? So they are not exposed this action, and then the platform team will take care of that. So that you can share the right amount of freedom or the right amount of self-service capabilities to the different API teams. And this is what we call to work in a federated environment. So that's it for the data plane deployment. Let's then continue our journey. Now that we have the data plane deployed, let's talk about the developer portal. So here again, the platform team did an excellent job setting up a developer portal. And again, Panos, who is representing the platform team, will walk us through the developer portal, the setup, and how we can make use of it. By us, I mean the other API teams. So now I will stop sharing and then back to you, Panos.
Thank you very much, Jordi. So as you can see in my screen, if I go to developer portals, as a platform team, we are also responsible for creating the developer portals and providing the developer portal and cataloging an API cataloging experience to the application teams as well. For this demonstration, as you can see here, I have created the Konnect Developer Portal. This is the one. As you can see, I have also integrated the authentication method with SSO, with my IDP provider of choice. In this case, I'm using Azure Entra ID. So if we go to our developer portal, under settings, security, you will see that the OpenID Connect authentication method is being configured. Just briefly, it points to my demo Azure account and my demo and a demo Azure application that I have created. So it's properly configured to integrate with my Entra ID as an identity provider. And as you can see, I can use the continue with SSO login to log in to the developer portal. The developer portal, as you can see, is also customized. It is using the Konnect company branding. So you can see the Konnect colors, the Konnect logos, right? And the UX people in the Konnect organization did a great job for creating a very compelling user interface for our developer portal. But as you can see, this developer portal is just a developer portal, which is initialized, is configured and integrated with the IDP and the correct integrations. Apart from that, it is empty, right? We have no APIs published in the developer portal yet. You can see that here. And also, if we go to the APIs page, you will also see that there are no APIs published yet in the portal. We only have the guides page over here, where you can see some guides on how to use the portal, and the getting started page and the home page available. So this is an initial developer portal installation, which in order to take meaning, in order to take life, right, we need our application teams to start publishing their APIs and make it a meaningful web experience rather than just a beautiful shell. So in this stage, I'm going to go back to the platform, the application team, and to my colleague Jordi, in order for him to showcase how the application team can start publishing and configuring their APIs on the developer portal using, again, shared actions and pre-provided automation.
So maybe, Panos, maybe it could be good if you can refresh the memory of the action that I will invoke, right? So
yes, of course, yeah.
So that we have an overview.
So again, right? This is an action, right? That the platform team is again providing to the application teams, right? And this action is an extension of the original provision connect resources action, right? So at the end of the day, the APIs, the API publications, and the portal resources are again just connect resources, same as control planes, same as APIs, same as API components. Everything we can provision and manage in Konnect are Konnect components, right? So what we have here is a action, right, that allows the application team to define in a declarative way the components they need to provision in Konnect, right? And then the application team can actually call this action, and this action will take care of provisioning the respective components. So for example, as you can see here in the Terraform, I will briefly show you the initial main TF file. Again, as I mentioned before, we're gonna share these repositories with you so you can spend as much time as you like to go over the code. But effectively, the idea is, and Jordi will also showcase it after me, is that the application teams, right, provide a declarative format of the resources they want to provision in Konnect. And of course, they have access to provision these resources based on the system account access, right? And based on the resources declared in that format, then the respective modules and the respective resources will be used from this action. For example, as you can see here, we can provision control planes, we can provision API products, APIs, API documents, API specifications, implementations, and every type of resource that we might want to provision in Konnect. So in this instance, we will be focusing mostly on the API resources, because these would be the resources that Jordi will be requesting for this demo. Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay, and that being said, from the platform engineering team, let's go back and wear the application team's hat with Jordi.
Excellent, thanks, Panos. So now let me share again my screen and we will see what my experience looks like, which is again very simple. Okay, so as an API team, the only thing that I need to specify to publish an API, because right now what I want to do as an API team is to publish my API in Konnect. That doesn't mean that the API is going to be available in the developer portal. That's a next step. But first of all, we want to make Konnect aware of my APIs. Then as a second step, then we can publish that API to as many developer portals as we want, right? That's why there is a separation between publishing the API in Konnect and afterwards, so creating the API in Konnect and afterwards publishing the APIs to one portal or other portals or many other portals. So the only thing I have to do is to declare that I want to publish these two APIs, and we will do that in a declarative fashion purely, right? So I say, hey, publish this. I want to publish an API. This is the Flights API version 0, and I have to then point to the OpenAPI specification. So as you can see here, under APIs, flights, there is an OpenAPI specification. So that's the OpenAPI specification for the Flights API. And in the same way, this is the OpenAPI specification for the Routes API, because we, as the flight operations team, we take care of a couple of APIs. Those two. So now I can go to Routes, OpenAPI. Here it is, right? So I have here the OpenAPI specification for the Routes API and the OpenAPI specification for the Flights API. So that's everything I have to do. I will then consume or execute a workflow, which is the provision connect resources workflow, which again is a very simple one in which I simply obtain the token that belongs to my team, and afterwards I invoke or I'm consuming the service that the platform team is sharing with me, that Panos was explaining. And all that complexity is hidden to me. So I don't know that Terraform or any other technologies are going on behind the scenes in order to provision those APIs into Konnect. I don't need to know, and even I don't want to know. I want to focus on the development of my APIs. So I simply invoke this action, and the resources that I declare in this YAML file will be then created in Konnect. It's as simple as that. Okay.
And also, if I may add, Jordi,
Yes.
these resources, right? If you scroll up a bit, you can see that this is the same workflow. This is the same file that we used to request and provision our control planes, right? This is the same file that we will be using for APIs as well. So it's the same workflow for all the resources we need to provision and connect. They're not different workflows. So as a developer experience, they only need to have a single file and a single workflow to do whatever they are allowed to do in Konnect.
Exactly. That's a very good point. Thanks, Panos. So I have this file. The state that I request from Konnect is declared in this file. So whenever I change something, whenever I remove something or add something new, I just have to execute. And then given that behind the scenes is Terraform that is taking care of all this, Terraform will synchronize the state to mirror what I'm requesting here. So now that I have updated this file, I uncomment the the Flights API and the Routes API. I'm ready to execute it. So let's go back again to GitHub. Now I will select the provision team resources and I can execute the workflow. And if everything goes according to plan, then we will see the APIs, the API objects publish into Konnect. Right? So here we can follow the execution. Now we will see that the Terraform is behind the scenes. So we are initializing the Terraform provider that Kong provides for Konnect. And it's now refreshing the state. Now it's realizing that I want to publish two new APIs. So it's getting here the Open API specification. Apologies for the scrolling. And it's now completed. So if I go back to Konnect and then I go to the catalog, under the catalog, I should be able to see my APIs, right? So I have the Flights API and I have the Routes API. So let's go, for example, under the Flights API, and I will see if I go to the Open API specification, I will see how Konnect renders the Open API specification. And I insist, this is in the interface of Konnect. We have not yet published this API into a developer portal. But I can see this rendering, so I see all the endpoints and some examples as the standard rendering of the OpenAPI specification by Kong Konnect. But we have some standards of quality at Kong Air, so the OpenAPI specification is not enough as documentation. So as you can see, if we go to the documentation tab, there is nothing else. So I want to add some markdown files to explain a little bit better what this API is about and what can you do with it and how should you do it. So now let's go back to my repository. And as you can see in both the Flights API and in the Routes API, there is a markdown file that has more information about, in this specific case, what the Kong Air Flights API is about and possible use cases, a getting started guide. So a more elaborated, more intuitive documentation. You can have as many markdown files as you want to document your APIs, and you can organize them in a hierarchical fashion. That's all good and fine. Here, for the sake of the example, we limited this example to one markdown file. But now, in order to publish this documentation, again, the only thing I have to do is to declare in my file that I want to publish those API documents. And so let's toggle let's uncomment them, and now they are uncommented. So we have the Flights API, and this is where we are pointing to the markdown files as the documentation for those. And again, let's then synchronize this. Let's add this, add a comment, push, and go back to Let's go back to GitHub, and we will execute again the same workflow, which will then read the state file and synchronize it. Let's go for it. And again, nothing new. It's the same workflow. We will see the same type of output. We will see how Terraform then obtains the markdown files. So again, apologies, I will be scrolling a lot. As you can see, those are the markdown files that were passing by. And now it has been synchronized with Konnect. So let's go back to Konnect. And hopefully if I refresh, now we have documentation for the Flights API. This is the markdown file that I just synchronized. And as you can see, it provides a much user-friendly kind of documentation for the API, explaining what possible use cases this API would be good to use, and having more detailed examples, even some Python code, and so on and so forth, right? Giving more details for each one of the endpoints as well, on top of what is available in the OpenAPI specification. So as I mentioned, you can create an arbitrary number of Markdown files to better document your APIs, right, in a very professional manner. If we go same, right, for the routes API, then we will see as well the documentation, the Markdown file has been uploaded. So that means that at this point in time, I have two APIs published in Konnect with their documentation, but they are not yet showing in the developer portal, right? Because the developer portal, because I have not published them to the developer portal. So still, if I go, I will say there are no APIs. If I go to the APIs section, I will see that there are no APIs. Sorry, I was logged out. So let me log in via single sign-on, right? So there are no APIs. So that's my next step. Let's now publish the APIs into the developer portal. And following the same pattern, it's a matter of specifying that I want to publish these APIs into the Flights API into the Kong Air portal, and the same for the Routes API into the Kong Air portal, right? And that's something that let's commit and push this change to GitHub. And we will see, let's go back. And it's the same execution, provision Konnect team resources, run the workflow. And now we will see that the APIs are published into the developer portal. Oops, this time we had a problem. Oh, the token has expired. So I think I need to ask my platform team to refresh the token. Let's give it a few seconds, and Panos will update us. In the meantime, something else that will happen when I publish the APIs into the developer portal is that we will see, if we go to the developer portal configuration for Kong Air, we will see here in the application authentication strategies that the platform team set up already dynamic client registration against our identity provider, in this case, Entra ID. So I will show you later the experience from an API consumer, which will be, it's very, again, very easy and self-service. An API consumer will go into the developer portal, will select the API that they want to consume, and once they select the API, they will then obtain the credentials automatically from Entra ID via dynamic client registration protocol. So that is something that we will see as well once we publish the API in the portal.
We should be good to go.
We are good to go now. Excellent. Let's run it again. All right. Okay, so now Terraform is doing its magic. Here we see that what will be applied, which is the publication of the APIs into the developer portal, and the job finished successfully. So let's go to the in here, if we go now to the developer portal in Konnect, and I go to the definition of the developer portal, now you will see in this section published APIs. And it's now that we can see that the routes API and the flights API have been published into the developer portal. And we can see as well that in my configuration file, in my state file, I specified that I wanted to use the Enter ID application authentication strategy, which is the dynamic client registration that I was mentioning before. So as you can see, those APIs are now published in the portal. So if I go back to the portal and if I go to the home page, now I scroll to the bottom and now we can see that we have the Flights API and the Routes API are available for me to explore as an API developer. And I'm changing my role. So I'm now an API consumer and I want to build an application using Kong Air APIs. So let's go, for example, to the Flights API. Now this is my experience. As you can see, this is the markdown document that I published, that I created. So I have here a nice explanation of what this API is about. Here you can see how the portal renders a menu for you. And I can as well, of course, look at the endpoints, right? So I can go to the OpenAPI specification for more technical details for each one of the endpoints, the expected query parameters, and so on and so forth, right? So I have all the details. So let's assume that I'm happy with this API and I want to use it for my mobile application, so to speak, right? So I just have to click use this API and I want to create a new application and I'd say, okay, this is for my mobile iOS app, right? As you can see, this is the authentication strategy, which is Enter ID. So right now I create this application entity and I request credentials for that application, for my mobile iOS application, which making use of the dynamic client registration, as you can see, this interacted with Enter ID. The necessary application object was created in Enter ID, and now I'm obtaining here my client ID and my client secret, so I can participate in, let's say, OpenID Connect flows for authentication to authenticate and be able to consume the Flights API, right? So I only have to copy somewhere save this client ID and this client secret, and then I'm good to go. So this is the simple experience that I have as a consumer of the APIs. So as we saw, I could do all this completely self-service, right? Let's recap a little bit. This is what I have to provide from an API team point of view. I just have to declare in this YAML document the resources that I want to consume, execute the workflow, which is very simple. Let's take a look once again. And essentially, it's about consuming the action that, with all the complexity that goes behind the scenes around the Terraform provider processing of all the entities that I want to consume, which is completely transparent to me, and I can execute this with complete autonomy. So this is it in terms of the API experience for publishing APIs in Konnect, and so creating the APIs in Konnect and then publishing those APIs into the the developer portal. Anything else? Anything that I missed, Panos? Anything else that you would like to add?
No. I think that that will cover the also the developer experience as well.
Cool. Very well. So going back to our plan for today, we saw now everything we wanted to show around the developer portal and how you can fully automate the API developer experience in the developer portal using, in this case, GitHub Actions and the Terraform provider. Now, let's take a look at the final step. Now that our APIs are published, we have our data plane, so we are ready to receive traffic. API clients can go to the developer portal, obtain credentials, and build applications that consume the API. So now the full picture is completed, except for the fact that we don't have the means to have observability. So we did that already, the publishing of the APIs into the portal, and now it's time to provide observability to the API team. So as an API team, I would like to have my own dashboard that allows me to monitor the performance of my APIs and the good health of my APIs. So I would like to be able to, in a completely autonomous way, create a dashboard for my APIs with the elements and the visualizations that I decide are the right ones for my API. Again, I will be using the same action exposed by the platform team. Maybe Panos, you want to comment briefly on the specifics of the dashboard processing in the action?
Yeah, it's actually exactly the same process, right, as we follow for any resource in Konnect. In the Konnect provision resource action, which is the action that we use to provision our control planes, our APIs, our API publications in the portals, and everything related, we use the same action to also allow the teams to create their own dashboards. What we expect from the teams is a definition, again, a definition of what they need from the dashboard. And then on the back, behind the curtains, we're again leveraging the Konnect Terraform provider and the appropriate resources in order to provision the dashboard that the team has requested in Konnect. So effectively, it is exactly the same process. It is exactly the same action. It is exactly the same common methodology for the team to request the resources they need from Konnect.
Exactly. That's part of the beauty of this. So this is a consistent developer experience for the API teams, right? So it's always the same pattern when I want to consume the different assets exposed by Konnect. Now, in this step, I'm going to then define in a declarative fashion the dashboard that I want to create here. So let me first uncomment this. And this is how I would then define the dashboard that I want to create, right? So let's take a look a little bit what I'm doing here. So when defining a dashboard in this specific repository, I can specify what charts do I want to view in that dashboard, right? So for instance, in this specific case, I want to have a chart which is a time series chart, and that will show the request by gateway service over time. So how many requests by gateway service over time? I am here specifying what position in the dashboard I want this to appear and what is the size of this specific chart. And what I will be then seeing there is that the request count, so how many requests for each one of the services that we are exposing, which in this particular example, we are only exposing one service, right? So we will see a time series for the number of requests for the services that we expose. The second element of the dashboard is about what are the top gateway services by request, right? So we will see a horizontal bar, and we will see the request count by all the services, the top ones that we will have. The third one is about the routes that we expose in the configuration, right? So which ones are the top routes by number of requests? So which ones are the most popular routes that the gateway is exposing? The next one is about the status codes of the gateway. So we want to have a donut type of diagram that will give us an overview of the status codes that our APIs are returning to the consumers, whether it's a 200 or 400 or 500 or whatever status codes are there. Then we have another one that will inform us if there are any errors. So 500 status codes which signal an error in the upstream. We will create a particular horizontal bar for this one as well. The next one will be, we want to see the amount of latency introduced by Kong versus the latency introduced by the upstream, so that we can quickly realize if there is something wrong with Kong that is introducing a very high latency. So we will use a time series chart for this, and we will compare the latency of the upstream versus the latency introduced by Kong. And finally, I want to see the average response time by the gateway service. So we will use a horizontal bar for that, and that will be a piece of information that I want to see in my dashboard. So this is how, in a declarative fashion, I specify the dashboard that I want to see. So again, now that is defined, let's commit and push this into GitHub. And now we go to the same experience. So it's a matter of, again, provision the resources. There is one new resource, which is the dashboard. So let's execute the workflow. And refresh and follow the execution. And if everything is correct, we will see at the end that Terraform is creating the dashboard entity in Konnect. Here it's the configuration of the dashboard, and the configuration has been applied. All right, so now let's go here. We have an analytics section in Konnect, which is where we will be able to see the dashboards. Here's a summary of the traffic. So we have behind the scenes, there is a K6 script that has been generating load in our API gateway. So let's keep it like in the last 1 hour. We want to see the traffic, right? So this is a default summary that we will see in the analytics section of Konnect. So you have a latency breakdown, total traffic, overtime, a comparison of the latency, which we will see in our own dashboard too. But this is a very high level view of the overall Konnect platform. But now I want the specific dashboard that I just created. As you can see, the name is Konnect Observability, which matches the name that I gave when I declared the dashboard. Here in this file is Konnect Observability. So this is the one. And if I click in there, I will see that I'm getting the information that I requested, right? So first of all, gateway request by gateway service over time. There is only one service. So here we see how the requests have been going. Now we can see which is the top gateway service by number of requests. Then again, obviously, it's only one. Which routes are the ones that are getting more requests? So here we have the get flights and the get flight by number. What about the status code? So far, all requests, or in the last hour at least, all requests have been successful. We don't see any problems with the upstreams. There has been no 500 error returned by an upstream. And here we are comparing the latency of the upstream versus Kong, right? So as you can see, Kong introduces very, very low latency, and almost all latency is due to the upstream service. And finally, the average response time overall, which is around 100 milliseconds. Right, so I have here, I could define the dashboard that I wanted to see, and I could request it in a completely autonomous way. No meetings, no interactions, no tickets that I had to open to the platform team. Of course, this is one way of operating. We are aware that not every company, that this is not the right way in every possible company or enterprise that we work with. Some of them require some, let's say, gates or some other steps in the middle, but our message here is that nothing is preventing you with the Konnect platform to offer a fully self-service and full autonomy experience for API teams to develop, of course, and deploy their APIs into the Konnect platform. And no deep knowledge is necessary for API teams. They can focus on developing the APIs. They can work at the Open API specification. They don't need to know the inner workings of the GitHub Actions and all the governance rules that are being applied in there. All of this happens automatically. So every deployment, every request is made in a governance way, following the rules and the guardrails that are implemented in the pipelines, as we saw in the first webinar and the second webinar of this series. So in the end, as you can see, as an API team, I've been able to fulfill the whole life cycle of the API without any interaction and in a completely autonomous way. I think that's the experience that we wanted to share with you during those 3 webinars. Anything else, Panos, you want to add?
No, I think that pretty much covers it all. The only thing that I would like to mention is that as engineer myself, right, I imagine that for the people that just joined this webinar and haven't actually participated in the previous 2, many of the things that we did and showcased today might seem like black magic, right? So my recommendation is that take the time, go and check the previous 2 webinars. The first webinar, which explains the platform team role in 100% fashion. The second and then the third webinar. We will also share the examples with you, and trust me on that, everything will make sense. So that was the only thing that I wanted to add to the great presentation you showed us, Jordi.
Exactly. So we will be fully transparent with all this, as Panos mentioned. Dalia will follow up with an email, and in that email you will find the links to the GitHub repositories in which all this has been implemented, so that you can take that as your starting point or customize it for your own environments as well. And now I think we are done with the presentation. There are still a couple of minutes to answer your questions.
Amazing. Thank you both. Let's see if we have any questions now. You can all put them in the Q&A section or in the chat. Let's see. Let's give it like a couple of minutes to see if anyone will put questions, and if not, we'll wrap it up. Okay, well, no questions for now. If anyone has questions, please join us on our community Slack, which is kongcommunity.slack.com. And yeah, we will follow up with you there if you want to ask something later. And if not, thank you everyone who joined. We will have more workshops and more developer days coming up November, December. You will find them on our website. They will be about AI Gateway. So I hope to see everyone there. And thank you both for the great presentation. I hope you have a good evening and good day, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.